The Orkney Islands, 11 miles north of Scotland's Caithness coastline, consists of altogether 70 islands, of which 20 are permanently inhabited. There are 3 alternative ferry routes, and we chose to sail from Gills Bay, just 4.5 miles from John O'Groats, to St Margaret's Hope on the Orkney island of South Ronaldsay, a sail of just over an hour. The Pentland Firth is a notoriously dangerous stretch of water between the Atlantic Ocean on the west and the North Sea on the east, and it features some of the fastest tidal currents in the world, and during spring tides reaching up to 16 knots or about 18 miles an hour. Today the sea is a bit lively, but nothing to make us too worried. Here we are coming into St Margaret's Hope and getting ready to dock. We're now going to have to cross over 3 small islands to get over to the main island of Orkney, known as the mainland, where we'll be staying. On the map, these are shown here by the 4 sections of road marked in red. These are the Churchill Barriers. During both the World Wars, the large area of sea to the west, known as Scapa Flow, was home to the entire British fleet. The closure of the eastern channels between these 3 islands by sunken block ships during World War I was an attempt to protect the fleet from enemy ships and submarines. But by 1938 it became clear that the open waters between these 3 small islands still presented a risk, and the sinking of the British ship Royal Oak by a German submarine prompted the Admiralty to construct the Churchill Barriers. On Lamholm, the last of the 3 islands to cross before reaching the mainland, stands the beautiful Italian chapel lovingly built by Italian prisoners of war whilst they were building the Churchill Barriers. It was created from 2 Nissen huts, end to end. Among the Italians was an artist, Domenico Cierchetti, and he led the task of transforming the 2 Nissen huts into a chapel. The interior is painted with remarkable realism to resemble carved stonework with a dado and ornate columns. Now, many decades after, there is still a strong link with members of the Cierchetti family, and they still visit the chapel from time to time. Now on the mainland of Orkney, we're driving up through Kirkwall, the main town in Orkney, continuing on through Finstown up to a small area called Gore's Ness, where we hope to find our destination, Avidale, which is our countryside retreat and accommodation for the next 10 days. Our first day being fine and bright, we chose to do a circular road walk of about 6 miles, starting off at Avidale and walking up the coast to the small harbour of Tingwall. On the way, we passed the beehive-shaped Rendell Ducot, or Dovecot, built in the mid-1600s for the family living at nearby Rendell Hall. Carrying on from there, Tingwall is the ferry terminal for sailings to the islands of Rousay, Weir and Egglesay. It's a quiet harbour which comes to life when the ferry comes in. And then an intriguing sign pointed us to Betty's reading room, and here it is. A group of creative friends from Tingwall have converted a derelict building into this wonderful reading room, open to the public to drop in and make use of. It's dedicated to their late friend Betty Pricktor. Betty loved Orkney, and she loved reading. It seems fitting. The following day was very much a mixture of dramatic cliff scenery and an introductory glimpse into the ancient history of Neolithic Orkney. We had driven out to the West Atlantic coast of the mainland to see the stunning cliffs of Yesnaby, a spectacular rugged stretch of coastline with its dramatic old red sandstone cliffs and sea stacks. That's the island of Hoy in the distance. Driving only 4 miles north of Yesnaby brought us to the historic site of Skara Brae. Skara Brae provides an unusually intimate view of life in Neolithic Orkney, over 5,000 years ago. The remains of several houses survive, but it is the furnishings and material goods that make the site remarkable. Here we're inside a reconstruction of one of the houses. The occupants were probably families, perhaps 3 or more generations living together in a single room. Each room has its own fitted stone furniture. Out on the site, this plan shows the layout of the 7 houses. Even today, the houses are in very good condition. The settlement was only discovered in the winter of 1850. A violent storm was pounding Orkney's rugged shore so aggressively that it actually washed away swathes of grass and sand, revealing an outline of several Stone Age buildings. A local laird, William Watt, began excavating the site. He was no archaeologist, but by 1868 he had unearthed 4 ancient houses. By 1930, the debris that had buried Skara Brae for thousands of years was finally cleared away. The buildings were so immaculately preserved that archaeologists declared it one of the most important Neolithic sites in Western and Northern Europe. William Watt, who discovered the historic site, was the 7th laird of Scale House, which lies adjacent to the site and is open to visitors. This is the man himself, and this is the impressive entrance hall. Visitors can experience a family home as it was in the 1950s. Kirkwall is the largest town in Orkney and is the administrative centre of the whole group of islands. The harbour quay is over half a mile in length, with marina facilities, as well as support for fishing and diving vessels. Cruise ships are to be seen here as well. In the summer, Kirkwall's narrow streets are crowded with visitors, although not too busy in May. But Kirkwall's crowning glory is St Magnus Cathedral. St Magnus Cathedral was founded in 1137 by one of the Earls of Orkney, whose uncle, Magnus, had been killed in a dispute over a disagreement. He promised the people of Orkney that he would build a great stone minster in honour of Magnus and create a place of pilgrimage. Today, the cathedral is owned by the people of Orkney and, by arrangement, can be used by any Christian denomination. This plaque is in memory of the crew of HMS Royal Oak, sunk in Scapa Flow by a German U-boat in 1939. Today we're heading for Marwick Head, which is about 5 miles north of Skara Brae, and its impressive cliffs stand 280 feet above the Atlantic Ocean below. It's an RSPB nature reserve and breeding ground for a large variety of birds. Here too is Kitchener's Memorial, erected in memory of him and the men of HMS Hampshire. At this spot in 1916, the Royal Navy armoured cruiser, which was carrying the Secretary of State for War, Lord Kitchener, was battling north in a force 9 northeasterly gale when it struck a mine and sunk within 20 minutes. Only 12 men survived and 737 lost their lives, including the Secretary of State. The memorial was unveiled in 1926, built and paid for by the people of Orkney. The tower is 48 feet high and cost £734 to build. Only 3 or 4 miles north of Marwick Head are the remains of the Earl's Palace in Bursay, built by Robert Stewart, the Earl of Orkney, in 1569. Robert was an illegitimate son of James V. It represented a bold statement of wealth and power. Less than a mile away from the palace remains is the Broch of Bursay. It's an uninhabited tidal island at the northwest tip of Orkney, which can be reached by a causeway when the tide is low. No sign of the causeway today. But now, on our next visit, there it is. On the island itself there are the remains of a Viking settlement and an earlier Pictish community dating back as far as the 6th century. Sadly, time was not on our side, and we were unable to explore the island. As the tide recedes, walking across the 800-foot causeway reveals amazing rock pools teeming with life on either side. Eight or 9 miles further southeast, round the coastal road from Bersay, brought us to a splendid stretch of beach near the small village of Evie, known as the Sands of Evie. Today there's quite a strong wind and a high tide, so the sands are hidden, but the view is impressive looking across to the islands of Rousay and Einhallo. But just around the corner from the end of the beach are the incredibly well-preserved remains of an Iron Age settlement, the Broch of Gurness. Brochs were essentially stone towers, many built during the 1st century BC, and were widely understood to be defensive structures. The ditches and ramparts which appear to have been dug around the tower would support that idea. But the Broch itself is also an indication of the wealth and status of the local chief who lived there. When it was built, it may have stood to about 10 or 12 metres high. This is perhaps what it might have looked like. There are also the remains of numerous small stone houses, perhaps built after the tower, but the settlement was clearly planned as a whole. Several houses open from a main street which runs to the outer entrance of the Broch. The Broch would have been capped by a conical wooden roof covered with thatch, turf or seaweed, and the dwellings around would have housed up to 40 families. A substantial Iron Age community. The town of Stromness is a picturesque town in the southwest corner of the Orkney mainland. It's hemmed in by a steep hill on one side and the sea on the other, and has a lovely waterfront of houses, piers and jetties. But it's also in a very sheltered bay. In the early days, trading ships crossing the Atlantic would often make a last stop in Stromness to stock up on goods before sailing. Main Street hugs the shoreline along the length of the town, although it was never really designed for cars, with its narrow width and flagstone pavings. Running off the street are numerous little lanes and alleyways, sloping down to the shore, with interesting buildings that reflect the town's maritime heritage. A few miles north of Stromness are the impressive Neolithic monuments of the Standing Stones of Staines and the Ring of Brodgar. Both are examples of a henge, a level circular platform surrounded by a ditch with an external bank, and both had a circle of standing stones around the edge, as seen in this aerial photograph of the Ring of Brodgar. The Ring of Brodgar is large, 104 metres diameter, and originally with a ring of 60 standing stones, of which 27 still stand. It dates from about 2500 BC, and it's the only major stone circle in Britain which is an almost perfect circle. The Stones of Staines was an earlier henge, possibly the oldest in the British Isles, and contemporary with Skara Brae. Originally there would have been 12 stones with sharply angled tops, but now only 4 remain, and the tallest stands over 6 metres high. Our last day on Orkney was spent at Ness Battery, just south of Stromness. This was a coastal defence station, and it was a crucial element of the defences of the western access to Scapa Flow, the main fleet base for the Royal Navy in both World Wars. It looks across to the island of Hoy and is one of the best preserved wartime sites in the UK. This is one of the 2 gun emplacements on the right, and on the left the tall concrete building which was the battery observation post and fire command. This was the nerve centre of the battery. The gun emplacements fired 6-inch shells which could pierce the side of an armoured ship and hit targets 7 miles away. The wooden accommodation huts, which housed 300 men, are still in place at Ness Battery and have been recently restored. Inside the mess hall there is a wonderful mural which depicts the English countryside with thatched cottages, a windmill and a gypsy camp. It was painted by A.R. Woods, who came from Wollaston in London and was posted here for 18 months in May 1944. During wartime, a vast number of service personnel arrived in Orkney, and the winters would have been tough for the homesick troops. His mural, an escape from the rigours of war, would no doubt have provided some comfort for them. He also painted this striking watercolour picture of the camp, with the island of Hoy in the background. And so, finally, at the end of our holiday, once again passing the beautiful Italian chapel and back across the Churchill barriers to St Margaret's Hope, we see our return ferry, Pentalina, waiting for us to take us back to the Scottish mainland.